All right, and so for the final panel, I've always wanted to, as I said earlier, can you hear me? You good?
You're muted.
Probably, knowing my luck.
Better? Yes. All right. Thank you. As I was saying, for our final panel, I've always wanted to do this panel. Particularly, it's great after an election because we always have the policy people, and rather than have yet another panel over, damn that net neutrality, this is the perfect panel. Now, I want to say up front, I really appreciate all of you guys coming. I remember when I was in college, and I was working at a lobbyist firm, and Time Magazine had a picture of Michael Deaver in a limousine with the and the headline was, "Who is this man?" I remember my boss at the time, "A lobbyist should never be seen or heard. He's like, they're supposed to work in the shadows." So I appreciate you guys coming out for this. I really do. So, starting, we can get a little more technical because this is telecom. But first thing, starting with what I started with the last panel, I want to ask, it's what's the climate on the Hill? I mean, there are real political pressures going on, and just sort of, are we going to be able to work together to get stuff done? Are we going to see increased rancor? I mean, you've got Keith Davidson, who may be the new DNC chair. What's just the temperature of the Hill going on right now? And Peter, why don't I start with you? You're close.
Is that what I get for sitting close to you?
Yes.
Okay, I'll remember that. Well, honestly, I don't know what the temperature on the Hill is right now. I think everyone's still just kind of digesting what's happened with the election. And there's a lot of stuff going on. You've got leadership elections, you've got committee chairs, you've got a couple other things going on, both Republicans and Democrats, and House and the Senate. So I can't tell you definitively that there is a specific temperature one way or the other. I can take a little bit of a guess, though, and think that there is probably a lot of people that are reviewing plans that they had for the next Congress, that there are probably a lot of meetings going on about new possibilities of things to do. I think people are probably dusting off. I know the Chairman Walden's subcommittee put out 6 or 7 white papers like a year and a half ago, I think, something like that, that were aimed at laying the groundwork for broader telecommunications reform. I know that Senator Nelson and Senator Thune had discussions for over a year about some things to think about, broader framework for an internet, a bipartisan internet governance agreement. So my guess would be that there is probably a lot of planning and thinking going on with the new set of variables that have been presented to the staff and to the members, combined with the fact that you've got kind of an unknown coming in at the FCC, which I thought everyone probably had assumed that the same policies would carry on for quite some time, and now that's completely up in the air. So I think, again, I'm a broken record on this. I've been saying this for however many years, but I would hope that the climate on the Hill is one of optimism, that they can work together in a bipartisan way to kind of create a broader telecom reform, internet governance, with all kinds of other interesting things in it, because there's a lot of unknowns facing Congress that's coming from the FCC, the FTC, and the administration. So my thought would be it's time to dust off the plans and get the bipartisan work going.
Kelly, what do you think? Just the feel of the general zeitgeist.
I think it's one of shock. I mean, honestly, I was actually in London just recently with a handful of members of Congress, and I think everybody is sort of scratching their heads and thinking about sort of what are the new opportunities that are available to them right now that maybe hadn't been over the last 8 years. So to Peter's point, I'm very hopeful that it can be a bipartisan exercise, particularly, as you all know, I mean, for years and years and years, telecommunications was very much of a bipartisan effort. It was never something that broke down on partisan lines. And I'm hopeful that's something Congress can get back to. There's opportunity to do a lot of good in this space and sort of break down some barriers and make sure the country has access to things like broadband. And to the extent that Congress can be helpful in that effort, we hope they can be. So, it's going to take a little while, a few weeks, if not frankly months, for folks to sort of figure out what this all means at the end of the day. But I am hopeful.
Right. James, on my right.
I think,
It just hit me.
like most people, the election results, given where the polling was, caught staff a little off guard. And I think for both sides, people who have pent-up expectations are now looking how they execute out on those expectations. But do they change when the likelihood of something actually happening is going to happen versus sort of, I'm going to put this out there as a thought piece? Then the stakes and the discussions become a little bit different. And on the other side, how do you move forward and respond? Because the first 100 days, first 6 months are chaotic. Those of us who have been up there, there are lots of nominations to process, lots of personalities to figure out, and ultimately there have to be a balance between the new administration and Congress, both between the new administration and its Republican majority and the administration and its Democratic minority, and how that plays out, I think is unseen, because maybe there'll be familiar faces and maybe there'll be unfamiliar faces. And let's be honest, Washington always prefers a familiar face rather than an unfamiliar face, and I think that is probably, the uncertainty is the part that people are struggling with most of all right now, because of who they thought were going to be the usual suspects are not the usual suspects right now. And so that changes the dynamic, and like any new administration, I think the Trump administration is going to want to lead and not be responsive to Congress, and we'll see if Congress responds by wanting to lead itself, or how this partnership evolves. Regardless of party affiliation, it's a little bit of an unknown, I think, relationship that we'll just have to see how it evolves.
James?
I'd agree with it, what everyone has already said. I guess the only part that I would add is, we've, better or for worse, I think we've lived through a period where we had, kind of a built-in antagonism between an administration and a Congress. And I don't mean that at a personal level. I mean, in how people view a lot of these policy issues. And obviously now with an incoming Republican administration, I mean, obviously, depending upon who fills that and what vision is ultimately put forward, that could change pretty radically. And to the point that was already said, how does that change the lawmaking machinery on Congress? I mean, the irony is that Democrats won seats in both the House and the Senate, but we're roughly where we were, for the last Congress as well. But that change in the relationship, I think, between the Congress and the administration obviously is a game changer that we're all going to have to watch.
Is there somebody on the Hill who maybe just got elected who wants to play in the telecom space, that we should be keeping our eyes out on? Is there somebody that did we lose a leading voice, that somebody maybe lost an election that was influential? Obviously we don't know who the administration's going to bring in, but we know who was at least elected, who, I really want to be on the Congress committee. Is there something we should be aware of or something like that? You guys know of?
Well, I think, Senator Ayotte
Right.
lost her election, and she's one of my favorite members of Congress all the way around. Just a quality person and a real contributor to the discussion in the committee. But there are a whole lot of people that are, I think, rising stars in the ranks. And I could call out a bunch of them, but I personally know Congressman Kevin Kramer from North Dakota, who I think is a great rising star, was the chair of the PUC there, knows telecom as well as anybody. I think there are 3 or 4 other people that are looking to get on the committee in the House, and I think there's other folks looking in the Senate as well. I mean, Cory Gardner, I think, is a spectacular guy and very thoughtful on these issues, really interested in spectrum policy and some other things, which is good. So I think there's really a very deep bench in Congress right now, and so I'm optimistic that there's an interest level, and there is now the opportunity to really roll up the sleeves and get some things done. I also say on the Democratic side, in the House, I know that there are also 2 or 3 great members of Congress that are looking to come on the committee as well. I don't want to jinx them by mentioning their names, but that have worked on these issues and have been paying their dues. And I think you're going to get some good new folks involved in the committees. And you don't actually have to be on a committee to be involved in these issues. What's so exciting is that the technologies right now are, and we're not even on the cusp anymore. I mean, they are exploding, and they're getting into all kinds of areas. So we talk about smart transportation, smart cities. You don't have to be on the Energy and Commerce Committee or the Commerce Committee to be dealing with smart transportation, smart cities types of issues. You could be on any number of committees doing that. So that if there's going to be a big infrastructure bill coming up, there used to be 85 people on the T&I committee. I don't know how many there are now, but it was the biggest committee in Congress. All of those members can play if they want to play on smart infrastructure.
Do you guys have any thought on that, Kelly? Or?
I was going to say that the ratios on the Energy and Commerce Committee and the Senate Commerce Committee are going to stay relatively the same. Is my guess. I think Republicans lose a spot on Senate Commerce, of course, with Senator Ayotte losing. I think that's sort of a wash. And they may be getting less seats than they were initially hoping on the Energy and Commerce side. So there's not a huge opportunity, I think, for these new members, unfortunately, to jump on these committees of activity for telecommunications. But I know Senator Young has expressed an interest in being on Senate Commerce. I mean, to Peter's point, there's a huge bench of folks, I think, who have expressed an interest in telecommunications and want to be active on these issues. Whether or not they land on sort of primary key committees of jurisdiction, there's just probably not going to be a whole lot of room this time around. But again, there are lots of ways to be involved.
James?
Well, I agree. There are lots of talented members, and there was a little bit of how much authority the chairman of each committee is going to delegate down to the dais and how that works itself out. But I also think for certainly TI's members, who's on the tax writing committees, how trade gets managed in Congress, how healthcare gets reformed or not reformed, moves forward. I wish we just had the luxury of only focusing on telecom. I know that's the focus of today, but our members are sort of taking a broad swath of what the new Congress looks like across a host of important issues. I think the continuity in the telecom space, in the key committees, gives people, great certainty and they know what to expect and sort of how that might look. I think as the other areas provide a little bit more uncertainty as to how Congress is going to respond.
Could I just
Sure, please.
James, do you want to say something? Okay, just wanted to add one thing to what James just said, and that is, yes, it's true that there are probably going to be other priorities that are being processed. So you're going to have judicial nominations, you're going to have confirmations of administration officials, you're potentially going to have healthcare, you're going to have tax bills, you're going to have infrastructure bills, which may be higher profile political issues than broad telecom reform we're talking about. But Congress can walk and chew gum at the same time because they've got multiple committees. So I think the good news is that Commerce and Energy and Commerce, while E&C may have some healthcare jurisdiction, largely they can be focused on this priority. So they don't have to be worried about tax reform necessarily, or maybe they play a little bit in an infrastructure bill. But they can really be focused on something like this. And when it's time, and this one's really important to get right. I think this one is more important to get it right than to get it done quickly. And this can take a little time to make sure that we have, a sustainable long-term, whether it's internet governance or whatever we're talking about. It's really critical to have a sustainable set of rules here. You don't want to have them flipping back and forth every 4 years or 8 years. Industry, consumers want some kind of certainty for the long run, and I think everybody wants that. So I'd say get it right, and you have time and you have the focus to do it, because you're not going to be doing all that other stuff.
James, any thought? You might take over the committees. So your prediction is that, just to ask, do we think that at least the Senate side is probably firm in terms of leadership and minority, right? It is unclear on the House side that if Walden or Shimkus does not get it, who would, is he termed out, by the way? Can he serve again, Greg?
Walden?
Yeah, or he's termed out.
No, I believe he's got, I believe he could, if he stayed at the subcommittee, I believe that he could serve another term.
So he has one
Just
more
for the
term.
full committee.
Yeah, the term limits are only applicable per your
That's-
subcommittee or the full committee, so.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's
If he
important.
were,
Okay.
right, if he were to take over the full committee, he starts with a new shot clock.
No, that's true, but I thought he was termed out for
I don't think
the
so.
subcommittee. I thought this was his last term.
He's got another term.
So he's got another term, so. if he
Somebody
gets-
else in the audience could, set me right, but I think he's got another
Okay.
term.
Okay. Kelly, did you have something? Or?
No,
Oh,
I don't
okay.
want.
You're not going there with a
I'm
10-foot
gonna
pole?
wait on that one,
Okay. All right, what I'd like to do, I mean, what's come up in the conversation is obviously, we talk about telecom, but our industry is affected by so many different issues aside from things at the FCC. Taxes, this notion of infrastructure, trade, healthcare. I mean, you guys deal with this all the time. So what I'd like to do is ask a series of 3 questions and hopefully try to get a Venn diagram to see where this goes. This is an interesting experiment. Now, the first question is, and this might be hard to answer, but again, if you don't know the answer, argue even stronger to get points. It's show commitment. What do we think the administration's priority, the incoming administration's priorities are? I mean, do we know? I mean, what is it they want to do? I mean, we hear infrastructure. Does that mean we're going to spend money on infrastructure? Does it mean we're going to use regulations so it's more profitable to invest in infrastructure? What are the administration's general priorities? And James, I'll start with you on that. That we know of. I mean, nobody knows, but
Right.
You were on the committee, right?
yeah.
Well, since I know,
You hear things.
I mean, look, I think writ large, the ones that we all hear about and read about are healthcare, tax reform, infrastructure. What those mean is anybody's guess. I think obviously from a telecom perspective, we're all working in industries that are highly capital intensive. You have to make big bets on futures that are very far away, so tax reform ends up being very important to our companies. And infrastructure is one of those that I think we've dealt with in other contexts before. I think one of the things that maybe is underappreciated, maybe it's not, is just the amount of infrastructure that we already have, and that all of our companies are working so aggressively to build as we compete with one another in all of these spaces. So, it's unclear exactly what that means. I mean, we went through early in the Obama administration a large stimulus package that people can judge for themselves what the effects of those were. A lot of the discussion that I hear around infrastructure in the Trump administration involves issues more focused on the tax code. But at the end of the day, I think we need to take stock of the fact that there is tremendous investment, that there is tremendous improvement in the network infrastructure of private companies, and we ought to at least sound a cautionary note about making sure that we're not stalling the good work that's already being done.
James?
I think we're sort of hearing the same thing, but I think our members are hoping that infrastructure is more of a broader concept of connectivity. And if there are ways to incentivize the development of smart cities or ITS, all of the things that the underlying network empowers are dependent upon private investment. How that gets affected, it's important to our members because there's both really, their customer base is sitting here and their own technologies are in play. So I think we're hoping for an expansive sort of discussion about what infrastructure is and how it can be leveraged, not just to put fiber into the ground, but to solve real problems, whether they be the problems of connectivity in smart cities, of healthcare in those areas, but it's a little unknown. As someone who did transportation in a different part of my life, funding transportation projects is challenging because they also need a return. That's why they have been generally financed with taxpayers' money or general revenues, is because a lot of these projects are hard to come up with a return on the capital investment. You can try to incentivize more private investment, but at the end of the day, those people are going to want a return on that money. And so, again, it goes into the dynamic of how these plans and proposals get made through the sausage factory that is the Hill is still sort of a little bit of an unknown as to what Congress is going to respond to, as to whether it's highways or transit or ports or broadband, there are going to be a lot of stakeholders. I imagine the three of us will be up there on a regular basis with our 2 cents as to how that process goes forward. But that sort of goes from I think everyone supports more infrastructure, but nobody really quite at the moment has a clear view as to what the administration is going to put down. Or will they be a little bit like the Obama administration did with the stimulus, let Congress run with it, and you can decide whether that was a successful process or not. But those are sort of the 2 models that the new administration will have to think. It's either their own language or turn to the committees and ask them to come up with a proposal in the first 100 days or 6 months, however long it takes.
Kelly, what do you think of the administration?
I mean, I would echo everything that's already been said, and I will follow on. Infrastructure is just one of those issues that I think all of our companies and associations are very anxious to be a part of. For CTIA and our member companies, this migration that we're going to be making from 4G to 5G, the infrastructure that's going to be involved in fulfilling that migration is pretty substantial. So to the extent that we can streamline regulations, reduce costs, find ways to make 5G a reality sooner rather than later, that's going to be a huge priority for CTIA and our member companies. And I know Peter can talk a lot about what they're doing over at Verizon, but I think it's a huge opportunity for not just sort of the country to sort of invest in that infrastructure, whether it's building roads and bridges and all those things. But I think we need to be thinking about infrastructure in a broader way. What does that mean, again, for connectivity, for making sure people's lives are better, and again, making that transition to faster, more reliable networks.
Can I just add a word? And I think, just to step back a little bit, I mean, I think, you heard certain themes from candidate Trump on the campaign trail, and they were generally, I think, lower taxes, less regulation, smaller government, and probably less interventionist policies generally. So I don't know, and I don't know this for a fact, but I would imagine that the incoming administration is going to be relying on those principles, kind of flowing down through more specificity in terms of the specific policies, and saying that, if there's more capital to invest, so if you have a tax bill that allows, that helps the private sector make more capital available for investment, and you at the same time are making the regulations smarter so that people are more likely to invest, that will go into infrastructure, that will go into other areas faster than it would have without those policies in place. Now, there may be some more interventionist policies, as James mentioned. Maybe there's, I don't know, I've, since the, 1998, have been playing around with some kind of broadband tax incentive proposal. It's an interesting idea. It runs a little bit afoul of tax simplification, to be honest. And so I think Ways and Means and Finance folks, and I've had this discussion with Paul Ryan in the past, and I think there's less receptivity to it because you're kind of further complicating the tax code by doing this. But, there's some arguments to do it. But I think you're probably going to see less of that and, more of the, kind of broader proposals. Now, Kelly mentioned, a couple of things that we're doing at Verizon, not to go all infomercial on you, but there is an example that's going on right now.
I can't hear you now.
You can't hear me now, right? And, basically what we did is, we're doing in Boston is we're investing $350 million to create all fiber network in Boston. And so why are we doing it in Boston? Well, there's a new mayor there. Mayor Walsh is very interested in attracting investment to Boston. He's willing to work with all comers, not just us, but all comers, to create an environment that is pro-investment. And so what's going to happen is, in the next couple years, Boston is going to have the most robust fiber network of any city. And why does that matter? Well, it matters for wired communications. It matters for street lights, getting antennas on them, and all kinds of different things. But also, as we move to 5G, 5G is heavily dependent on a fiber infrastructure, because the throughput from your mobile device, your smart camera right there, is going to go up to an antenna in the corner of the room or on a light post that has got to be very attached to fiber, very close, because of the throughput and the latency requirements. That requires a huge amount of fiber. So you're talking about, what do you need? You need spectrum, you need fiber, and you need investment to lay that infrastructure. And we really are, we're very close to the cusp of 5G, which is amazing. 10 times at least the throughput of 4G, latency cut by multiples. So you're talking about remote healthcare, remote surgeries, intelligent transportation, autonomous cars, all kinds of cool stuff. That can happen with this kind of investment.
All right, so we've got circle one now. Admittedly, it's a fuzzy circle of what the incoming administration may want to do. As we have a better idea of what the Hill, here's my next question. What do we think the Hill wants to do? Let's assume that Greg Walden either stays as subcommittee chair or goes to full committee. Either one are viable options. I mean, Chairman Walden has put forth a whole bunch of things that he wants to do, spectrum, FCC reform. What do you think Congress wants to do? Are they similar to what the administration? James, what do you think? I mean, what's high on their list of priorities? Reversing of Title II, taxes, state preemption, municipal broadband. What do you think is on the plate?
So certainly, I think when you start any Congress, there's always a series of things that maybe didn't make it over the line before, that maybe low-hanging fruit, and we'll see what in the waning days of this Congress dies on the cutting room floor or not. So there may be a series of things like that. There's no question. I mean, we've been consumed by net neutrality for so long. I would have a hard time believing that they wouldn't want to try, as Peter kind of referred to earlier, and settle this thing once and for all. And we've lived in an environment where, like it or not, the agency has been very aggressive in how it has read its authority, and this is an opportunity to reflect upon what authorities the agency needs, and that obviously involves a discussion with members on both sides of the aisle. And I know that there were discussions that broke down in this Congress, but there's certainly an opportunity to pick that up. And I think having been through this a while, certainly at a staff level, there's a lot of interest in doing that. And what follows beyond that, I think you put your finger on it, and certainly as what Kelly referred to, regardless of whether it's a cable network or a wireless network, all of these networks are having to contend with increasing insatiable consumer demand for data. They're all getting denser. They're all getting fiber further out, closer to the consumer. And really, in some sense, in the next, 10 years, the only difference is going to be whether the last hop is over Wi-Fi or over licensed spectrum, or the networks are going to start to look very similar. So anything that we can do to kind of remove obstacles to private investment, I think would be, tailor-made for this Congress to look at.
Kelly, what do you think the congressional priorities would be? I mean, there's so many.
There are so many, and this has been said. Anything that sort of hasn't been accomplished over the last 4 years is certainly going to be something I think members of Congress are going to be interested in. You sort of focused on a potential Chairman Walden. If there's a potential Chairman Shimkus, he's indicated a desire to sort of take a holistic look at the Communications Act. And we all know what a ginormous task that is. Chairman Walden, as subcommittee chairman, certainly started that endeavor. We spent a lot of time and effort doing white papers and responding to questions, and just putting your arms around that kind of project. It's a really big job. So if that's the case, and there is a Chairman Shimkus, I think everything's really going to be on the table.
Yeah, we don't know.
We don't know. So, it's sort of limitless right now.
James?
One of the, since we're discussing potential issues, the FirstNet contract should come out sometime in the next month or so. That will certainly be a little bit of a game changer for public safety communications. How the new administration manages out that significant sort of public-private partnership, and I'll be the first to admit there's a personal stake for that, me, more out of a legacy issue, but there are other issues out there that Congress needs to sort of keep on top of and will have to be managed. I think that, as I said, the House will be able to, like it generally does, move faster through a series of bills. The confirmation process, I have every expectation it runs reasonably smoothly, but it is a process. There is only so much time, and given the lack of clarity as to what the administration's policies will be, I would expect that senators certainly will use the confirmation process to sort of glean out where they're headed, which is something that will just force the Senate to be a little bit slower in the first 6 or 9 months. And again, it goes back to, even though there are multiple committees, tax reform, healthcare, potentially trade issues, just consume a lot of oxygen, and balancing those out will require a balance for members and how much they can do.
And don't forget a Supreme Court nominee.
Supreme Court nominee,
Small little thing.
other openings and how that plays out. I'm a Senator Schumer, a new Democratic leader, and his relationship with Leader McConnell, well, it seems right now very positive based upon the statements in the press. Look, we've all been around and worked for folks in public service a long time. There is always an inherent desire to do good and to get things done, even if the means to getting there winds up different. So I think the Congress starts out with a reservoir of goodwill, like each Congress does, and we'll see how long the reservoir lasts. You hope it lasts longer than not, but it's politics. Sometimes it dries up a little faster than you think.
I'd also just quickly add Chairman Thune to the mix as well. So there's a long record of things that he's been trying to get done. And Chairman Thune, member of the leadership, senior person in the Republican Senate. And so I think he's anxious to get going on a lot of these same things. I think there's a lot of overlap between the Upton, Walden, Shimkus, Thune agenda. Many of the same ideas, sliced slightly differently. I don't know whether they're going to want to try to do several smaller packages of bills as you do kind of reform, or do you wrap it all up into one big deal? I'm not sure that it really matters that much at the end of the day. Sometimes I think there's pros and cons on each of those. A bigger deal allows winning and losing within a deal. It might help you get to the necessary votes a little bit more, but it takes a little longer to get there. But Chairman Thune has his Mobile Now Act. He's proposed broader internet governance reform. I mentioned earlier he and Senator Nelson from Florida have been negotiating for quite some time on big principles of reform. So I think they've done the hearings, they've done the white papers, they've done the work. Many of the people in this room have written multiple papers, have testified, have gone to conferences, innumerable conferences like this. I think we've done the work. I think the due diligence is there, and now I think they can just roll up their sleeves and get down to work and start moving some legislation.
Okay, so that's our second circle Venn diagram, which brings me now to my last one. What is it that you guys want? We have 3 people here from trade associations. Obviously, you can get a good flavor. You can say, well, it's not what I want, it's what my members want. Here would be the only person, obviously, from a single company. But there's a lot of things that need to get done. Access to spectrum, digital goods. What sort of the things that, if you look at, Title II reformation, whatever that is. So what are the things that we can start to see moving to complete that interaction of the Venn diagram? So James, why don't I start with you? What's important for your members?
Well, I'll start with a non-telecom one first. Honestly, trade deals are important for our members. We're, by and large, global businesses. Our supply chains run globally. Not that, those are going to be challenges for the next administration, but certainly maintaining the free trade and those issues is important. I think if you looked at the what we want, everyone seeks certainty, which is always a little hard to come by. But as long as, we've had a good flow of spectrum in the pipeline for that to continue. Our members are heavily involved in the R&D behind 5G and evolving network technologies. And as James said, I think some of the right policies that incentivize investment from the other folks up here on the panel to continue to invest in the network. As I said, there's been a lot of talk about the edge, but I think what often gets left off is that the core of the network needs an upgrade. There still are significant fiber investments that need to be made as capacity. I tell people all the time, think about a world of connected cars and the sheer amount of data that it's throwing off. Every single second, there's potentially tens of thousands of vehicles running down a road. If you want to collect that data, you need to find the infrastructure to receive it and then transport it, the data centers to manage it, and the analytics. The network is more complicated and is often forgotten, but I do think is those policies that help incentivize more investment from the other folks on this panel into the core of the network and the edge of the network are what we're hoping for.
Kelly?
I think our members, I think this is true, frankly, of business generally, just want certainty. And that's what allows the investment, that's what allows the sort of free flow of investment into very expensive projects that certainly my members invest in. But I mentioned certainly infrastructure is going to be a primary issue for us going forward. Again, making sure we're streamlining regulations, making sure we're making it possible that our member companies, like Verizon, I should just ask Peter what we want, that our members are able to build out a really robust 5G network, and that it's something that's available to consumers sooner rather than later. Spectrum, obviously, is something we care a great deal about, and we've had a fair amount of success on the spectrum front, but the insatiable appetite for more and more, whether it's data, video, games, cat videos, whatever it may be, consumers want it, and we need to find a way to make sure they can continue to have that. It's not degraded at all. So there's going to be a lot of conversations in the next few years on how we maintain that spectrum pipeline and continue to make sure that commercially we're able to offer our consumers what it is they want.
What about digital goods? I know that's a top topic.
Yeah, that's honestly an issue we spent a lot of time on, and we're continuing to work to sort of shake that bill loose out of the Judiciary Committee over in the House and see if we can get that done end of the year. But that's assuming that doesn't get done. I know there's a lot of priorities to take care of at the end of the year. The whole digital goods conversation is something we're going to continue to work on. We want to make sure, again, that a product isn't taxed 4 times by 4 different jurisdictions, because again, that's just making it more difficult for the consumer to get what it is that they want.
Peter, what would you say your company's priorities are? You're in so many different businesses now. Data security?
Yeah. So, well, let me just step back a little bit from that, Larry, and answer your original question to the people to your right. Let's talk a little bit about what this election was about, and kind of what American people are feeling like right now. And I think you can call it populism, you can call it kind of insecurity, you can call it general unsettled feeling among people. And I think it's really striking. I've seen some of the focus groups, the Frank Luntz groups, and different things, and I'm just really struck by kind of state of people. And I think sometimes we're insulated here in Washington in these rooms like this. We don't really get a feel for what's going on out there. So I think what's really important when we're talking about policies like digital goods, James mentioned trade and cross-border data flows. So, that sounds like an esoteric topic. Digital goods sounds like it's an impenetrable topic. I need Stacy Sprinkle in my office to explain all the intricacies every time we go into, state taxation. It makes my head hurt. But I think what's really important is that we talk about these policies not in the way, and this isn't spin, this is reality. It's not what's good for big companies. It's what's good for the consumers. And if you take something like digital goods, Kelly got it exactly right. So we're doing with digital goods is we're simplifying a system, a tax collection system. We're taking away the possibility of having 17 and 20% tax rates every time you download something, whether it's a job search or some music, and you're putting in place some kind of a regular tax, general business tax rate that everyone agrees to, and you're figuring out who pays what to whom. You simplify it, it's good for consumers. Talk about digital, you're talking about cross-border data flows. Again, is it big multinational companies? No, it's about, it's about the cloud and being able to use the cloud and access content you want to access and have it be affordable and available. And I think all of these things that we're dealing with right now, these new technologies, are very empowering to people, and they're empowering to people in rural areas and in urban areas as well. So these are all good things that is going to happen to people's lives if this technology revolution continues. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to really rethink the way we talk about this and message, and understand, the way this advocacy is perceived in the country as well. So I feel very passionately that this technology can be, very empowering to the average American, and that we need to get that message out better.
James?
What was the question?
Question is, for the cable industry.
No, I'm in the third circle, yeah.
No, you're in the
yeah.
confluence.
Yeah,
You're right there.
Well, hopefully we can bring it all home.
I know why I forgot, because I was just in violent agreement with, what everyone said. I mean, at the end of the day, you're looking for a low cost of capital, you're looking for regulatory certainty, and you're looking for a system of fair competition. And the last one is obviously a loaded term, because who we compete against in this 21st century economy, it seems to change day by day. And that takes us back to, thinking about Telecom Act reform and, what are the rules of the road for any one particular sector or service industry. But again, I think our companies like the business they're in. They're obviously making big bets on a long-term future for our country, and they want as stable a regulatory environment as possible within which to operate.
Well, let me ask you this question, because this has come up in a lot in our research. As I said, we're doing our year-end review. One of the things that we ended up focusing a lot on with the Phoenix Center's research was municipal broadband. But municipal broadband actually brings a whole host of related issues, because you have this feeling a lot of times that municipalities, much like I think what Peter you just said about the election, people don't feel empowered. Why aren't people coming here? So they sort of, you're not going to do it, I will. So you're starting to see on the state level these, like one-touch regulations. So you have this tension between the states and the feds. And the question is that how do you think Congress sort of looks at that issue in terms of at what point do we go, look, we need to have some preemption here, or in the case of putting aside the Sixth Circuit and the whole municipal broadband. But there is that tension, and there always has been, because we want to deploy, and as James said and as Peter said, we want low-cost deployment. But as we all know, trying to put a cell tower somewhere is not a pleasant process. How do we, is there something we can do on the federal level to help that? I mean, Kelly, that's lots in your wheelhouse, but I mean, all that is, I think that's one of the most major, when the rubber meets the road type of topics that we don't see a lot of talk about these days. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, these preemption issues are, they're emotional issues at the end of the day. You're dealing with a lot of members of Congress who frankly used to be mayors or used to be on their city councils, or, they have a connection to what it is to be a local government or a state government. So, these are issues that, associations like ours have to tread carefully and explain if there's a problem in a certain area, whether it's, again, streamlining the ability to get a small cell on a lamppost outside, why that's important. What does it mean for consumers? What does it mean for the average citizen? And that's really incumbent on us to make sure we're explaining why it's important, why it's necessary, and at the end of the day, what it means for jobs and productivity and the ability to live a better life. So, all of those preemption issues, they're sticky and they're hard, and we're going to continue to work through them.
You guys have a
Providers are changing lives in a way that we sometimes fail to discuss because we're discussing interconnection or fiber or bandwidth, and it sometimes is not relevant. But if you can go in and discuss how connectivity, how this infrastructure as is equally important to making somebody's life better in very clear, specific ways, I think it's a much more compelling argument that our industry makes across the board than some of the, I will say, probably just because it was me, providing regulatory certainty was very low on my list of things to do every day as a staffer. It just was. Trying to execute somebody's agenda to solve a specific series of problems. Regulatory certainty may bring that about, certainly, but deep down, that's a tough one to wrap most politicians' head around, that is why they were elected to Congress, was to create regulatory certainty. Again, absolutely critical, but not maybe the best argument that we sometimes use in making our case.
Dawn?
Yeah, James hit it on the head. I spent about 9 years at the National Association of Broadcasters, and they would send us out periodically to go talk to state broadcast associations, and I would get this question all the time of, how do you lobby? What's the best way to lobby? How do I do this? And at the end of the day, it's telling a story, and you all know this. The best way to go in and educate either a member or a staffer is to tell them a story. And I feel like the wireless, and certainly telecommunications more broadly, the wireless industry, we have a great story to tell. And you talk about something like the Internet of Things, and I can't tell you how many times I've said that word and just eyes glaze over. I mean, they love the concept of Internet of Things, but they have no idea what it means. So if you can put it in these tangible, understandable, relatable ways, what it means for healthcare, what it means for education, what it means for your kid who has to do their homework late at night. It's just all about telling a story at the end of the day and turning it into something that they can sort of palpably understand.
Well, I want to thank my panelists for a truly excellent discussion. I thank you all so much for coming. I hope everybody enjoyed it. And now we will move very quickly to our awards. So thank you very much.